All right, so I figured it out. I did a couple things. I set the board's flex direction to column, which makes sense, right? Because we want all of the rows to just cascade downward, right? And then um, I set each row. I think I did this in the last video, but yeah, each row is 100%, and it has a height of 33.3%. And so like just a tenth away from being 100% combined. I had to set display flex on the row because it is a parent container of the squares, right? And I had to also set the flex direction of each row to row, right? Um, because otherwise I think they just inherit the column flex direction from board. So same thing in the square. Each square is 33.3% pixels wide. It's got a height of 100% to fill the entire row. I don't think this is necessary, but I had it in there for good measure. The font with these measurements, 72 pixels, will based on the automatic line height, just kind of appear right in the center, which is nice. I don't think this is doing anything either. Okay, so I got rid of that. It's fine. And outline, I just set an outline so I can see all of the the squares. Cool. So we are doing pretty good. You're gonna want to make sure just to import your styles, appropriately named, and set the class names where appropriate. Okay. Now this is already this is already getting pretty unwieldy, so I want to refactor this. Again, that's a common practice in React. You get stuff working and you refactor. You refactor pretty constantly to just make things nice and organized. So instead of handwriting a bunch of squares, I'm actually just going to make a square .js. You might be wondering, would it be a good idea to also make row.js? You could certainly implement it that way, but I know based off of like my my mental model of how this thing is going to work, that the squares like the squares have to do more in terms of feature and function than the rows. The rows just hold squares in rows. The user doesn't really interact with them beyond that. The squares, however, the user interacts with pretty exclusively, right? That should that'll become a little bit more apparent when you see how we're going to go about doing this. Okay, so yeah, so I created that file. I'm going to go ahead and open it, start creating it. All right, and now import React from React and function square props. Okay, return. I think I've forgotten to mention this so far. So when you return JSX, you have to do so in parentheses like this. If you don't, it will, like in our examples in class, I've just been doing return, like with those header components we made. I've just been doing like this. Now that's fine because this is returning, for one thing, it's returning on the same line, and it's a self-contained JSX expression. It's a self-contained piece of JavaScript that looks like HTML. If you don't have parentheses and you have like a fair amount of JSX like we do in board.js here, it'll start wigging out and it'll yell at you. So not a big deal. Just if you forget to use parentheses, you'll get an error, and it'll probably tell you that what you did wrong. So instead of handwriting this stuff, we're gonna go grab the code that we want to refactor from here, right? So I just need one of these, and you're gonna see why in a second. So square.js and return div last name square. Okay. And export default square. All right. And so, yeah, that should be good. Okay. Now I'm going to replace all of these squares with squares. Duh. Yeah. So let's go ahead and get rid of some of this, because I'm just going to copy it over again. And so we exported the file. Now we got to import it. Square from ./square, right? And we do square. Okay. Okay, and then I need 2 more of these here and 2 more of these there. Okay, and so let it reload, see if it still looks the same. Got some errors. Expected a string, but something, but got undefined. You likely forgot to export your component. Okay. So let's see what I did wrong. Square.js. Oh, I forgot to save. My code looked good, but I forgot to save. So that's working, right? Cool. So you see that how that error was working? Let me just make it undefined again so we can see that error again. Because, you know, the error handling in React is usually pretty great. So it tells you that you have an invalid element type. It tells you what it expected. So like a string or a function. So functions or classes, those are usually what we are writing in React. And remember, the rule of thumb is if you can make a component functional, make it functional. Like don't use class if you don't have to. And then it says it got undefined. It tells you what it expects. It tells you what it got. If we call a component that we haven't exported, then it's going to be undefined, right? And some of this is helpful, some of it is not. The stack trace stuff here. This is just showing you where stuff went wrong, you know? And usually I'll look through here. I don't look at much of this stuff. But this is somewhat helpful, right? So anyway, I don't want to beat that to death, but that should just preparing you for errors you might hit along your development cycle. Okay, so fix that. It's back in action. And now, so this is a little better. It's not much better. It's still pretty repetitive. So what would be nice is if we could use JavaScript to our advantage and make this like automatically generate 9 squares. Kind of dry it up, and I mean dry it up, as in like dry it up. So do not repeat yourself it up. So we're gonna do one thing real quick and then talk about how we're gonna make that happen. Spoiler alert, it's gonna use props. So let's go ahead and open app.js. Okay. And here we go. All right. Let's see here. What I want to do is mock some data. I want to have like kind of like Kai had in his example. He had an array that represented all of the possible winning squares and whatnot. So normally in a React project, you would be loading data from somewhere else, from like an API, you know. But for right now, we'll just write it with plain JavaScript. And this is something you see a lot of other developers doing. They mock data first, so they don't have to start wrestling with an API or anything like that. They can just get stuff rendering and working and then refactor it later once they're ready. Okay? So what we'll do then is is make an array with 9 squares. There's a smarter way to do this in Kai's video, but I don't quite remember, so we're just gonna do like, I'm gonna say like board equals, and we'll say like this. Okay. All right, so that's not bad. And let's see, const. Just say let. I'm gonna think about this a little bit, and we'll come back. Just go ahead and add the board to app.js. And then when I come back, we'll talk about what I did.